Let's return to the budget now. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt will set out his tax and spending plans for the years ahead later on this morning with a focus on growing the economy. Well, with me now is Justine Greening. She's the former Conservative Education Secretary and also former Economic Secretary to the Treasury. Good to have you here this morning. Thank you for coming in despite the strikes. A big expansion of childcare we're expecting today. Could this be a game changer for the Tories, do you think?
I think it's certainly going to be a key battleground at the next election. Labour have talked about bringing forward some ambitious plans. I think for parents, most importantly, for many, this will be a welcome change. There's no doubt that for a significant number of parents of very young children, the cost of childcare is prohibitive. I think the real challenge for Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor is almost not just this announcement, but then implementing it. How is the childcare sector really going to be able to expand to provide that extra capacity? And do the numbers make sense for many childcare providers who will say that really their challenge is that the amount they're being paid by the government per hour of childcare doesn't really match the costs of providing it?
Well, indeed, because when you were Education Secretary, the government brought in 30 hours for 3- and 4-year-olds, but there was concern that if it wasn't funded properly, that the costs would be passed on to those with younger children, and that happened. Do you think the government will get the funding right this time?
I certainly hope so. And one of the toughest areas introducing the policy originally was to work out that rate for providers, because there are so many different circumstances that they're in as businesses. It's actually quite hard getting one rate that will suit all of them in a sense. But broadly, this policy has been a success. I think it has absolutely supported often working women to get into work. I think this is now the next stage. It was always something, I think, on our agenda, even introducing the 30-hour provision, that you might want to go down the age range. So I think this is a welcome step forward. Implementing it's not going to be that easy, but actually I think for many parents it will be good news.
Are they just nicking Labour's policy, though?
Oh, come on. I think the public just want to see change on the ground, and actually...
Is that a yes?
Well, I don't think it really matters as far as the public are concerned. No party's got a monopoly on good ideas. And I think if political competition means that the good ideas are taken and implemented, then that's good news for the public.
You mentioned women and getting women back into the workplace. It is really crucial, isn't it? What would be the economic benefit of getting a whole load of mums of 1- and 2-year-olds back into the workplace quickly, do you think?
I think it's twofold. Partly it's the skills gap that we got and obviously the workforce shortages, literally. I think the second thing is hopefully meaning that parents, and particularly women, often who this affects, that are already in work, don't perhaps have career disruption that they wouldn't now get if they're able to actually access childcare earlier. So I think it probably has a double benefit for both the economy, but also women being able to more easily continue in their careers once they've started a family, which I think, in terms of gender equality, is a really positive step as well.
You're really passionate about social mobility. Do you, looking ahead at what's trailed in this budget, is there anything in it that you think that's going to really make a difference?
Well, the one thing I really want to see is reform of the apprenticeships levy. It's not just about getting more people into the workforce, it's also about upskilling, reskilling and allowing more people access to opportunity, particularly younger people. And I think we all know how tough COVID has been for many people in the education system. So I think a sensible set of reforms to the apprenticeship levy would not only allow great employers that want to spend more of that levy reskilling and upskilling people to be able to do that. I also think it would provide a lot more opportunities for young people. And in the end, Jeremy Hunt, I think, is quite right to say this needs to be a budget for growth. That's what's being trailed. But the one thing that will really turbocharge growth in the UK is actually improving social mobility and making access to opportunity fairer in the future than it's been in the past. And that is fundamentally about a talent, a skills agenda. And that's what I really hope we hear a lot more about today as well.
What about public sector pay? Obviously, today is happening against the backdrop of all these strikes. The possibility that public sector pay increases could go up to around 5.5%, we think potentially in the budget. Would that be enough, do you think, to stave off strikes?
Well, it doesn't look like it at the moment. Obviously, the pay review body will look at almost the market economics of this. And I think at some stage, an agreement is going to have to be reached by the government. But when you look at some of those key shortages we've got in the public sector, whether it's teachers, whether it's in probation, whether it's in the NHS, actually, again, You look at people who have left the workforce, perhaps slightly older. I think we need to change our mindset on the fact that people come into careers and move up. Actually, people can reskill and retrain even well into their 40s and 50s and have successful long careers in some of these key roles that are really important for wider society.
And also potentially increasing the amount that they could put into their pensions. Do you think that will really encourage people like doctors perhaps who might have retired early, to come back to work?
All the evidence seems to suggest so, and it just seems a sensible step to me to make it easier for people who want to keep working to do that. And of course, post-COVID, with more hybrid working, actually this old-fashioned sense of retirement that one day you're working 5 days a week, the next day you've retired and you're doing no work. I think we all can see that as employers bring in generally more flexible work practices, there is a real opportunity for people to keep active, keep working, but also do a better, stronger job of providing for themselves once they get into older age.
We're also not expecting tax cuts for personal taxes. A proposed increase in corporation tax, we think, is still going to go ahead. How do you think a lot of Conservative backbenchers will feel about that? Do you think that enough else will be offered for Jeremy Hunt to square the sort of circle of discontent? I
think this is perhaps the most challenging issue for Jeremy Hunt. He's got this really tough call, hasn't he?
Whose fault is that?
His now boss, Rishi Sunak, actually introduced it as Chancellor, and many of the people who are now saying this is a terrible rise were part of Boris Johnson's government that introduced it. So I think the substance of it in practice for growth is that I get that corporation tax is going up. I think the plan is that you'll backfill that tax take with incentives for investment for companies, and so make it more targeted to drive growth. But actually, in a knowledge economy, a lot of that growth needs to come from upskilling, reskilling and talent. And so actually, the danger, I think, for Jeremy Hunt is he puts it all into incentives for companies to invest in things, technology, but there aren't the incentives there as well for companies to invest in people. And actually, that, to my mind, means you need a more measured change of the corporation tax, because often it's increasing tax that just literally means a company looks at its wage bill and thinks, well, I can't grow the staff that I need.
So pushing it up to 25 you don't think is necessarily the best idea?
I think there needs to be a balance, and there's one area that I do think Jeremy Hunt needs to think very carefully about, and that is for these mid-sized companies. So the headline rate is going up to 25% for companies with profits over $250,000. The 19% rate we've currently got remains for companies with profits 50,000 or less. But for those actually quite small companies earning 50,000 to $250,000 profits, they now have a rate of 26.5%. And so if you think these are the fledgling potential growth companies that are going to really drive the economy in the coming years, I think we really need to look at making sure those businesses are supported, because going from a rate of 19 to 26.5% is a huge rise for them to bear.
OK. Justine Greening, good to see you. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.